Hi, I'm Julie Morrison. I am Psychology Department Chair and College Assessment Director at Glendale Community College in Arizona, and this is IntroPsychSessions.
Welcome to IntroPsychSessions, Season 3. I'm your host, Garth Neufeld. In Season 2, I overhauled my Introductory Psychology class and chatted with a bunch of amazing teachers of psychology about the process. Then, some of you emailed me with questions or comments. So I invited you to take the Intro Psych discussion further. These are our conversations, and we hope you'll all enjoy Intro Psych Sessions Season 3. Hi, Julie. Welcome. And have our paths crossed before in person?
Never in person, as far as I know.
So. Yeah.
I think just in online spaces like Intro Psych Coast to Coast and probably a few other places.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to talk with you today because you have like lots of ideas. I mean, our email correspondence was really exciting to reread as I was preparing for this, because you are thinking about things and doing a lot of different things. And I think you're the first chair here in Season 3. And so you see things not only from a teacher perspective, but from an administrator perspective too, right?
Right. Yes. So I'm in a kind of unusual role. I am officially full-time faculty, but I am a department chair, and I also am reassigned as our director of assessment for our institution. And so I only do a little tiny bit of teaching, and most of my teaching is to basically support the other work that I'm doing and the people that I'm working with. And so a lot of what I was getting out of PsychSessions had to do with how do we take all of this and use it either in the classroom, in the assessment space, in the combination of both of those, and at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, well, and thanks for explaining that. What was it, or what were some of the conversations that maybe we had in Season 2, or that things that outside of the podcast as well? But what were some of the things that kind of that you brought to your work and was really relevant to the kind of conversations that you were having?
Sure. So I run in the mornings, and I have to admit I don't love to run. And when I can't run with my friend, I of course pop in Psych Sessions. And so a bunch of times this summer, I had a number of them on. You know, the Ask episodes are fabulous, but the three that really stood out to me, I started with episode 172 with Melissa Beers, where she's talking about Gen Ed and the Gen Ed redesign at Ohio State. And we are in the state of Arizona of redesigning Gen Ed for all of our community colleges. It hadn't been touched since the 90s. And so at the same time, we are being tasked with doing the assessment of Gen Ed. So I'm trying to kind of integrate those things. And we've also just been cleared to teach bachelor's degrees at the community college where I'm at. And so we're thinking about how do we scale Gen Ed at that level. So there's all of that type of work. So that got me initially started, and I shared that out with our entire. So our institution is part of a 10 district or 10 community college district, and I lead the assessment group for the district. And so I shared this one out with all of our leaders in assessment, and then my local leaders. And so we've been having conversations about that one. The other two that kind of spoke to me as a Psych 101 instructor and department chair and a course lead for assessment in my own department is the conversation you had with Jane Hallinan about, she has an opinion on assessment. And so like thinking through how you were trying to think through the types of assessment you would do in a course setting, but also talking about some of these larger questions of program and Gen Ed. And then So I shared that episode with my department and asked them to listen to it. And I also shared the bonus episode with Eric Landrum about the pendulum swinging, looking at a very different way of doing Psych 101. And, thinking, obviously there's a lot of flexibility, but again, going back to those issues of how do we think about program assessment and what are the higher order skills and how do we balance content with, these broader competencies and how are we measuring it, not just in the course, but across the program? How does it tie into Gen Ed? So these are all the big questions that we're grappling with, at my specific department, but then also at my college and even in our district.
It's interesting that you, and we can talk about any of these, but it's interesting that you bring up Eric's interview for season 2 of IntroPsychSessions, because it was the strangest one. And he'd love that I said that, I think. It was just the strange. I was giddy when he was telling me about that. I'm like, talk about just blowing up the box, right? Now, tell me, why was that an important episode, or what was it about that was interesting to you? Was because my gut feeling was, well, we obviously can't do that because where are the standards, right?
Right.
But it's kind of tempting, isn't it?
Actually, it is not tempting to me at all. No offense to Eric.
Okay,
no,
okay.
no. So I should also say I am a peer reviewer for my accreditor. And so a little bit of what was going through my thinking was like, is he meeting, issues of seat time and equivalence in terms of, the credit hours and I absolutely want our students to be completely engaged in that class. And I want it to be one of the most fun they have and one of the least stressful. But, speaking of the pendulum swinging, I'm like, is it swinging too much? What's, and I wanted to hear more. I know that you asked during the session, but I really wanted to get into more like, what do you do every day? Because I think he's probably adding more content in than it sounded like, because they were meeting regularly. But I'm like, but I think part of what was really thought-provoking to me about that is he mentioned that research around, that they had done showing that 2 years in, students don't remember the content. Well, we're a 2-year school, so I'm a little less concerned. I am thinking about, I want to have the conversation with my department members about what expectations do they have for what students are coming in knowing. So I teach intro psych. I also teach our capstone research methods class. And I have expectations of what they're going to have coming into that class that I can't imagine not being met. And again, thinking about a program assessment standpoint and, what are these big things that students need to be doing? How is that happening? So I think it pushed the envelope as to, okay, we really can step back from content. And there is a lot of flexibility there. And we probably should be spending a lot more time thinking about the higher order skills that we want students learning in that class that they either take into more psych or, many of them not more psych. And so I like that aspect of it, but it felt like maybe there's a happier medium. And I would be interested after he did it for the conversations he had with his department around, are students coming prepared into other classes within that department with the skills they need? And I loved the things he was doing. I try to do a lot of similar, very applicable activities. And there's a lot of equity and assessment research showing if you can get students engaged in what's interesting to them, it's a better assessment measure. So there were a lot of good parts of it. But again, it was sort of these more programmatic questions that were coming to my mind.
Yeah. So he was on the subcommittee for IPI who actually wrote the outcomes. So I hope he's using them. I think he is, which is good. And I hear what you're saying. So where did that leave you? Like what did these episodes, like what kind of conversations did they produce? Did they lead to decisions that you all have made at this point?
Well, so I just listened to them this summer and I've sent them out, and I've been in a few email exchanges with faculty who've listened to them so far. And I was really careful when I sent them out not to comment on IPI, not to comment on, what any of my reactions. I said, just listen to them and then let's talk. And so we are going to be really thinking through this year kind of a course assessment from a programmatic space, because we're entering our cycle of really looking at intro psych and wanting to tie it to our other courses. And so this is where I want the conversation with my department to start around, what is this happening? But I also would like our faculty, most of our faculty teach intro psych. I would like to hear, with something as different as Eric did that inspire anyone to think about innovations they might want to do that they might have felt constrained? Because our course competencies here in our district are very, very content specific. And so, we often have this model of let's go through all the chapters. And what he was recommending even sort of made me feel a little refreshed around, okay, if students aren't watching all of my online videos and they aren't, learning everything in the textbook, that's okay, because they're probably getting enough. And if they're picking and choosing, that could be good too, because that's sort of in line. So there were some really nice conceptual things in his model that I think we can ponder.
Yeah. Yeah. I can tell that you think really seriously about the architecture of things, and I'm interested in your intro course. How do you design your intro course? Now, we can go anywhere. Our time is limited, so if you're like, I don't want to talk about that, Garth, I want to talk about something else.
No, I completely want to brag on my department and our intro course.
Let's brag.
So the semester that the pandemic happened, we had been in a conversation in the beginning of that semester where we are like, we really need to develop a strong course that we can hand off to our adjuncts who are coming in, that we can sort of share and use. But then we're like, well, where's the time going to come from? Who's going to do it? And we're like, yeah, forget it. Nobody really wanted to take it on. Well, then the pandemic heard us and said, all right, here we are. So we're a large community college. And as we were heading into that first summer, we had 20 faculty who had never taught online. I was one of them. And there was no way that, we could just make them all figure out intro psych in an online space. And, our regular faculty, many of our faculty who teach advanced classes, they were busy, converting advanced classes to different formats. So what we did is we crowdsourced a Psych 101 online shell under the supervision of one of our faculty who's an educational psychologist. And so, full of backwards design and aligning assessments to learning outcomes and, to the videos and everything. So what we did is 14 faculty, a combination of our full-time and part-time faculty, volunteered to each teach a module based on their expertise. And so now we have this guest lectured online Psych 101 course shell that many of us use. And so students get a different person each week, which is great. I highly recommend it. Students stay engaged because the person changes each week. And then they also like it because they'll be like, ooh, I really liked that faculty member. I'm going to take their advanced class. Because we always we let them know, if you liked this, you can take it with this person. So there's a lot of, marketing in this course.
Well, there's a lot of upside to that. And then, I think that this is really interesting. I don't know if I love I don't know if I'm against. I don't know if I love the idea of doing this in a face-to-face class, but in an online class, I think why not? And I'll tell you why. Face-to-face, I think we're learning so much about just student-teacher relationships, and that means something, I think, for learning. But in online, there is this just natural disconnection, and so why not find other ways to keep students curious, keep them engaged, and people coming through? I love it. I love it. I love it. It's good.
Yes, and it has worked really, really well. And then all we said was this first. That first COVID fall, we said, we're just all going to do it together. We're all going to learn it together. We met weekly to prep, because, I didn't necessarily know what the person was going to be teaching about, and it might have been a little bit different. And after that, we said, now personalize your course. We do, so it's primarily used in our online courses. A few of our faculty have decided that in their in-person classes, they've used it as a flip model. So they've kept part of it, and then they do sort of engagement activities in their class. Other faculty have discovered that the students who are signing up for in-person don't want to be watching videos. So they've gone back to a traditional in-person. But if nothing else, it's a great resource to see the way that somebody is teaching the material.
Yeah. You get to watch each other too.
Yes, it's fascinating because I think about how I would have covered it, but then here's how somebody else is covering it. Huh. Yeah, it's real. And then it just really frees us up to do all of that student interaction. Now we're hearing from Department of Ed, regular and substantive interaction in online courses. Yeah. And since we didn't have to kind of build the course, now we can do all of that through the assignments and the work, and we can also personalize it. So we have a lot of faculty, some faculty have kept it the same, but a lot of faculty who, like me, who've now taken it and made it really fit our interests, maybe made it fit a little bit with the IPI. And then, now we're at the point where we need to think about how we kind of update it. We don't want it to kind of stay stagnant. And that's where I want us also thinking about how do we start revising it, maybe to better align with IPI.
Yeah. Where are you at with IPI right now as a department?
So as a department, I don't think we're too involved in it. We have one faculty member who's very heavily involved in APA initiatives. I went to the IPI workshop that happened this summer, and we have some other people within our district who are very involved as well. But we haven't spent a lot of time talking about it, and our course competencies don't really address it. We might be, our instructional council might be looking at that this summer. Like, should we be maybe revising these course competencies away from this content heavy to this more IPI? I think, as far as I know, I'm the one who's used it the most, partly just because of the resources offered through, APA and STP. But yeah, and I've mostly focused on theme F more. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things fall into the course, but I've mostly focused on theme F, which is applying what you're learning. And my whole course is organized around students applying the work directly to their life, either their personal life or their professional life, because I feel like, if they're never in a class again, at least that's their takeaway. And for me, I think that accomplishes what Eric is trying to accomplish. I want them to have a very meaningful experience that they will remember. And if they're applying the course content continuously, I'm hoping at least some of those applications will last beyond the course.
Do you have them? Are they writing to apply those things, or do you have a favorite assignment or something that you use with students?
So there's a number of things that I do. The two most popular that students have reported is so it's an 8-week course, so it's condensed, and each week on their discussion board, they have to find something in the videos or the textbook that they think relates to their life. They have to reteach it, so that others can kind of get exposure to that material and I can evaluate their comprehension of the material. And then following that, they explain how they are applying that content to their life. Okay. Or how they think they might apply it in the future. So they have to in some way connect it. And they, like I said, connect it to their personal life. They might connect it to family life. They might connect it to their career. And so they're doing that, every week. And then I added this past semester an assignment that focused on that was kind of a replacement for a final exam. And I really wanted to get them to do community service, but I also knew these were online students. They might not always want to or be able to easily do community service, although we do have a volunteer month on our campus and students can come and do volunteer activities easily. So what I offered them is, you might be familiar with Laurie Santos's Happiness Lab podcast. So I said, either find a podcast episode that speaks to you, or, go to one of these community service activities. And there were a few things they could do from home as well. And then again, tell us all about it in a discussion, and then tell us kind of what it means to you. And I admit most students chose the podcast. A few of them did the community service, but there were a handful of students at the end of semester evaluations who just sort of spontaneously said, like, that was the most impactful assignment because they really were able to pick what mattered to them. And a few of them had said, I want to listen to more and I want to do more. So those are kind of my favorites.
I like the idea. It's just so neat to hear people's kind of creative approaches to how to assign things, because we know that students students learn better when they have some amount of control over their learning. And so when you say you can listen to this podcast, but you choose it. You choose which episode that you're going to listen to. I just love that, because now students are going in not just like wrote agreement and I'm just going to say yes and click on this link, but now I have to go dig through these and read the topics. I just, it's such a creative, when you say it out loud, it sounds like, well, of course, that's a fine idea. But then when you think about your assignments that don't give students that options, it's just about like, how can I think out of the box to give students some amount of like choice here or whatever.
Right.
So anyway, all to say, it's great. I'm going to steal that idea.
Yeah. And I do have a weekly assignment associated more directly with the material, but it still tends to be more application based. They're taking a personality test and reflecting on it.
Yeah.
My favorite in-class assignment was a mirror drawing assignment. And so I show them how to create a mirror drawing apparatus at home, and they have to time themselves and talk about that experience. So there's those pieces too that they don't have as much choice in, but yeah, the ones they talk about seem to be these ones where they get to pick it. Even the weekly discussions that way, they have to find anything that was covered in that module that speaks to them.
Yeah. Talk to us about the mirror drawing. What is that exactly?
Oh, so yeah. So
I think I have an idea of what it is.
Yeah, we have these mirror drawing apparatus that, basically you put your hand underneath the screen so you can only see it reflected. And then you typically have to trace a star. And so in class, I would have students, time each other, and they do their dominant hand or their non-dominant hand without the mirror. Then they have to do it with the mirror. And they, of course, experience a lot of frustration, and it's slower. And interestingly, the data shows that you tend to be faster with the mirror with your non-dominant hand, which they don't necessarily expect. And so what they do is they do this star tracing. We then have a Google form where, thousands of our students have put their data in. And so they submit their data, then they can see the overall data. Then I have a little video that explains how this task relates to all sorts of things in psychology. And then they have to kind of reflect upon that. So it's, that type of assignment. I have some other creative assignments where they have to, build a tower out of books and paper or come up with interesting drawings, in the creativity chapter. And again, those seem to be the favorite things because they're just a little bit different. And I encourage them. I'm like, do them with your family or your friends if you have them. So some of them will do that as well.
You have a creativity chapter?
In the thinking and intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
Yes.
Great.
So
okay.
I've coached something called Odyssey of the Mind. It's a creative team problem solving competition for kids from kindergarten through college.
Wow.
And they do these spontaneous activities. So I use them as ways for students in my research methods to get to know each other, to figure out what groups they want to be in and who they want to work with and who they don't. Because this is like fun competitive aspect. It's building spaghetti towers out of spaghetti and marshmallows, but I also have them do it in that chapter. And then they have to interpret it, using an intelligence theory, and, they can bring up mindset, and then they have to talk about cognitive biases that are occurring during that process. So it's fun.
Wow. What do you not cover in your intro course?
Well, again, our competencies right now, are basically everything. The only competency we use an OER textbook. The only competency that doesn't really have something right now is IO Psych, but I think our students want to know IO Psych, so I put it in. So we do have, we are sort of traditional in that we have a module for each of those areas. Students do get to, drop a chapter so they could skip some information.
Sure.
And we know from our YouTube views, they're not watching every video, but at least they're, maybe picking and choosing the things that help them do the assignments. So, and I do like them personally getting a little bit of flavor. I haven't quite decided in the IPI, the pillar model of, selecting kind of a few things. I think I would be more likely to do that. And I actually did do that more in my in-person class than in the online one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Well, this has been really helpful, and I love some of your ideas. I know that you reflected some other things to me. Is there anything that you want to chat through that we didn't get a chance to cover yet?
Well, I have to put my assessment hat back on.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges with assessment is there's so many different ways of doing it. And I don't want a standardized, intro psych tests that we all give. But what I would really love to see, so for any of you who are listening, or you, Garth, who have an in at APA or wherever, I would love us to find ways to think more about program assessment in psychology. And how could we maybe do that a little systematically? What is the research basis for this? So I'm involved in a group called the Learning Improvement Community, and it is a group of primarily assessment professionals who are focused on assessment at the program level. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about assessment, we're talking about, this is going to take a good year or so. You're doing pre-testing, you're doing post-testing, you're looking across programs, you're ensuring meaningful change, you're ensuring the reliability and validity of the way that faculty are implementing that change, and that you're really seeing strong evidence of student learning improvement. So I would like to, I don't want to, my favorite thing is to steal what other people have done. So I'm like, how do we do that? And what are the evidence-based practices? And there really isn't a lot in the literature around kind of how to do that. And I feel like I often see in STP and other places, faculty asking for this. So I feel good about like course assessment, but these bigger questions, I feel like they could be nicely handled by more conversations on a national level around how do we do this, and I know that there's associate's level and bachelor's level, outcomes coming out, getting revised, I think, by the APA, and there are some old ones, but, it's nice to have them, but, how do we implement that in a meaningful way to not just confirm student learning, but truly improve it as students go through our programs?
Oh, interesting. So the application, like Guidelines 3.0 for the undergraduate psychology major is coming out probably later this year. But your kind of passion right now is how does that get worked out to improve student learning?
Right. Because I think what we see a lot in the assessment space is people go and they write these fabulous outcomes, but they don't think as much. And obviously on a national level, this is harder, but even like on our local level, our program was designed with all these outcomes, but nobody did the backwards design. Nobody said, well, how are we going to measure the outcome of this? What's the way in which it's going to happen? Yeah. How can we ensure that students really are meeting these objectives? And so, I would love to see my institution potentially adopt whatever APA is going to come out, or think, or adopt and adapt if necessary, but then think through, how are we actually going to be sure that this is what students are getting? And that we're doing it in an evidence-informed way and implementing the right types of practices as we are engaging in interventions to ensure that we're seeing that improvement.
Well, that's great. I hope that you'll share that as you're doing it. You'll find a place that you can share it out so that the national psychology community can kind of benefit from what you all are doing over there.
Right. Well, those of us in assessment, we're always welcome to have people join in assessment conversations. There's national assessment organizations and journals and all that. So, feel free anytime to jump into that space.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good stuff.
Well, and people can find you online, right? Julie Morrison at Glendale Community College, right?
Yes, in Arizona, because there's a few of us.
In Arizona.
A few GCCs, yep.
Yeah. Well, hey, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for your nice email. And I'm glad we got to speak today.
Yes, no, I appreciate it very much. And just a shout out to PsychSessions at IntroPsych Coast to Coast. I won a microphone from PsychSessions, and Garth's like, hey, make sure you're listening to PsychSessions. Like, absolutely. And it was the best decision ever. And hopefully I'm coming through clearly.
You are. That sounds great. So was that the AKG mic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the AKG desktop mic. I forget. Does it have numbers on it? Does it?
I don't see any numbers on it.
Yeah, I mean, you sound so great. So it's about $100, folks, and definitely worth it. You're probably 3 or 4 feet from it right now. 3 feet?
Yeah, 2, 3, something like that.
Yeah. Audio quality matters. It matters for accessibility. It matters for just clarity and the message that, like, when somebody is trying to speak to you about something, you are more likely to hear it if the audio quality is good, or you're more likely to listen to it. So I think it's good from a teaching perspective as well. But
no, it's been fabulous. It had
Yeah.
winning this prize had so many wonderful outcomes that are going to impact my department, my college, my district. So
I
all
love
thanks
it.
to
Now
you,
we got to
Garth.
go. We got to go buy some more of these and give them away. So anyway, Julie, thank you and take good care.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.